Cool. Dude, we're finally doing it. So
Finally.
this is hilarious. James and I were just talking about how you and I, we don't have to, there's no one else here.
No.
It's just us. Dude, we have had this conversation just not recorded for hundreds of hours over the last
Literally
couple
hundreds.
years. Yeah.
Literally hundreds.
It's funny, man. I don't know what's kept us from actually putting the camera on or a mic and just like sharing it. And I think like I had a conversation with you, or I texted you when I was in New Zealand a few weeks ago, and I was like, we have to record something because I feel like we have good conversations. And it's not like we have all the answers, but we have answers that have worked for us that will hopefully work for other people as well.
Yeah.
And so I have a sense of like obligation to go like, let's just like turn it on, share what we have, and hopefully, one or two people will be helped in the process.
We have to do it.
Yeah. So we live in Bali. You live 2 minutes up the road, which is fantastic. And I actually can't remember where we met. I got to know you more deeply at Taki Moore's event end of 2019, I think, in Manly in Sydney.
Yeah.
Had we met before then?
We'd chatted, but we hadn't physically met before.
Classic internet friends.
Even though the little tiny internet community in New Zealand is literally tiny.
Yeah, exactly. and then you were in Bali at the time, so you came over to Manly. We spent those few days together. You went back to Bali. COVID happened. You came back to New Zealand. We spent a lot of time together then. I remember we spent a couple of days together in Auckland, which was great. When our cities weren't in lockdown, and it was such a weird time. And now that I live here, it's just been amazing because we obviously get to catch up multiple times a week. Yeah. And there's our favorite cafe out there called Honey that we hang out at. And so anyway, if we go back for you, I met you when you were already doing this, and there was a time when you weren't.
What is this, by the way?
Exactly. I mean, what do we do?
I think we'll go there, though.
Yeah. So whatever it is, the heck that we do right now, there was a time when you didn't do that. And so without going through the whole origin story of like, well, and actually, let me ask, because I don't even know.
Yeah.
Where were you born?
Born in Auckland, New
gotcha.
Zealand.
Yeah.
But most of the adult life was in the UK. So I went there in my early 20s.
Right. And so what were you doing in the UK?
So my first jobs were all in sales.
Right.
So moved
Say
there.
that again. What sales?
In sales.
Oh, in sales.
So I got the blue chip training.
Right.
Like Vodafone, BMW, and those companies. And then I went to become a financial advisor.
Right.
And I went there and they were like, hey, we lend money out and we charge interest on it and people pay it back. And I was like, oh, this is a bank.
Yeah.
Cool. And so I always wanted to work for myself. Dad was a entrepreneur, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did car parks and music businesses and all kinds of things.
Right.
So that was like the model. You do your own thing. Mm. And worked for a bank and was like, I have to turn up to a bank and wear a uniform. Yeah. And like completely the opposite of what an entrepreneur wants to do about, wear what we're wearing and no shoes and shit like that.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, okay, this business thing can be really simple. You can just have something that people want.
Right.
So I started a finance company. But the finance company, I started a finance company. I got a consumer credit license in the UK and I went door to door and I sold photography packages in low income areas. Yeah, so I would knock on a door and I'd sell them a photography package for 200 quid. Right. And then they'd pay it off interest free over 20 weeks at £10 a week. And then after 4 weeks, I could go and sell that to a finance company who'd pay me more than the face value of everything. And I made a couple of £100 off each one. Yeah. And I was like, this is good. And then...
But look, quick pause. Was it good in the sense of how did you find the work part of it? Like you're knocking on doors selling photography. Like was it a brutally hard season of like learning the skills and having doors shut in your face?
See, I didn't. And even in hindsight, I didn't.
Right.
Because when I was at school, all my friends were going to work at the mall to do present wrapping and work at the body shop and the warehouse over Christmas. Right. Like when we were 14, 15. And I was like, screw that, you get $5 an hour. Right. And I went to do like work in a galvanizing factory for $20 an hour, like work stacking magazines. So I was always like, where's the highest yield? And I never minded the work. Yeah. So I think going forward into like knocking on doors sucks. Right. Because the level of rejection and danger you get is ridiculous. But I never, even in hindsight, and maybe I've romanticized it because I've told the story many times. Yeah. Even in hindsight, I didn't find it difficult. I found it interesting because I love creating something and offering it to someone else and then learning and tweaking along the way. Mm. And that's been the consistent path through there. Yeah, right. So you're selling these, doing this stuff door to door, and then where did it go from there? So I learned WordPress and I learned SEO because the guys I was selling my leads to, they were like, we're doing online leads. Yeah. So I self-taught myself WordPress and I self-taught myself SEO and I started dabbling with Google Ads. Right. So I started generating leads online. So I could get an online lead for like £6 or £7 and sell it for 50 quid to these. They're kind of, I mean, they're called kneecap finance companies. I mean, they trap people in debt, which I like look back in hindsight and go, yeah, the moral.
Wait a minute.
The moral, kind of things, and that's what made me end it.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I saw someone say, if you can't imagine being in this business in 5 years, like, why are you even in it today?
Yeah.
And correspondingly, at the same time, I got done, and I had a £70,000 bill that I owed on ads and all these things for leads that I couldn't sell to them because they all went out of business in the financial crisis.
Oh, okay. So that was around the time, 2008, 2009.
So in the space of a couple of weeks, all my customers went out of business and stopped paying me. The financial crisis hit and found out we were pregnant with our first child.
What was that period of your life like?
Again, like as a marketer, I've probably romanticized it, so it's even more difficult to tell.
Yeah.
It was fucking stressful.
Right.
It was unbelievably stressful, but it's in those moments where you're like, what do I really want to do? Who do I really want to be?
And was that clear to you at that time, or is that something that was evolving? Like,
no, not at all. I think, in hindsight, the North Star has always been the tinkering piece, making something, putting it out there. Like, I was always a top performer in sales because I'd always be interested in the person and interested in the psychology of what I was saying, what was coming across, the dynamic, the relationship, and those things. And I think the next thing that I did, I was literally sitting at home one night watching everything crumble, and I emailed a startup in London called Living Social. So Groupon and Living Social have both come onto the market, a daily deals market, and they just exploded into this thing because local businesses could use them to get customers, which is notoriously difficult.
Right. And
I emailed the general manager who, they'd come to London, they had about 4 or 5 people, and he said, can you be in central London at 8 o'clock the next morning? It's like, yeah. This is like a response like that to an email at 11 o'clock at night. Got there, got the job on the spot, and then 16 months later, there were 350 people. They'd been funded with 800 million by Amazon. I was in the middle of another thing, which was all about making lots of offers.
Right.
And, but in the online space.
This is fascinating to me because I don't even know this stuff. Like, I know the New Zealand origins.
Yeah.
But I didn't quite know the UK stuff. And so at this time I'm fascinated because most entrepreneurs have the story of like, I was born an entrepreneur, I was unemployable, I kept getting fired from places. That doesn't seem like it's your story. Like, I'm sure there were moments of like, this is hard, I would rather be doing my own thing. But like, apart from the tinkering, was freedom, autonomy, sovereignty, was that a big part of the value set at that point? Or did that come over time as you're exposed to more kind of the online space and people actually talking about it? Yeah.
It was only after Max was born, so Max is my son. It was only after Max was born that I started to look at the environment we were in and not want to have children in the system. The type of things that we call them that we maybe not won't say out loud. The consequence of what I did became much more real.
Yeah.
That it wasn't just me and I could float through, and it didn't matter if I, maybe did things that were compromising values, like working in an industry that's keeps people in debt. Right. Didn't matter, right? There's no consequence. It was like I was making money, who cares?
Yeah.
But after he was born, I was looking at what we're in the system.
Yeah.
In terms of, the system of society, and especially in Western society. And I was like, okay, you need to have options.
Yeah.
And the belief that has never gone away is like true freedom is downstream of financial freedom.
Yeah.
So you can make a lot of impact and all these words, the buzzwords, but unless you've got choices, you can't really get to true freedom. And people can throw around what that means to them, and it is very personal. But it wasn't until Max was born that I really thought, I need to cultivate an environment where I'm living in something that gives them choices.
Yeah.
Because of that sense that the world's not going to be the same. And if it's the same as it is now, then I'd rather plot an alternative course around it.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't even have a work ethic until I got married, and especially when I had my first kid, Brooklyn, like 7 years ago. That was when I felt I found another gear. I was like, oh, okay, like I like the stakes are higher, especially because my wife and I, for most of our 20s, we were working for the church. We were broke, but it was we both decided we were going to be broke, and so neither one of us was resentful or bitter. It was like, we're in the trenches together. But then you bring a human into it, and I was like, man, this isn't his choice. Like, I need to like find another gear in myself to kind of take things to the next level. Yeah. And so where does New Zealand enter into the picture? Was that around that time, a little bit after? Because I know you then stayed in that industry and came to New Zealand.
Yeah, so I was approached by the guys who cloned Groupon in New Zealand, which was called Grab One. Right. And they were like, this industry, and we were roughly in Europe and the US because it was a US startup, but I was in London, about 2 years ahead of the sophistication curve of like what was going to happen, what was the market, expanding into products, expanding into travel and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so I went back, did some stuff with them on travel and like a sales kind of role.
When you say you went back to New Zealand.
Went back to New Zealand.
Yeah.
And that was always in the plan. But that freedom thing was under, used to listen to a podcast called Tropical MBA.
Right.
And it was by two dudes, Dan and Ian, who were here in Bali at the time over a decade ago.
Wow.
They were talking about 1 megabit internet and like pitted roads and stuff like that, which is a bit different to now.
Yeah.
But the vibe was the same.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the digital nomad. Digital nomad became a phrase.
Yeah.
Right? And I was like going on the train into work, listening to these dudes jamming, and it was like that was happening all along the way in terms of the underlying soundtrack of like there's something else going on.
Yeah.
And then went back to New Zealand and worked in travel, was made marketing manager and made marketing director within a few months. And again, it's like right in the middle of this environment where you can test human psychology.
Right.
Which is addictive, right?
Yeah.
You put these things out there en masse in large numbers and you see how people respond.
Yeah.
And that's super addictive to me. So I've always been in the middle of like that interrelationship and the feedback loop in business of like making offers and watching those things come back and like, how are people responding to this? How are they acting?
Yeah.
And that cut my teeth in terms of to where we are now and what we do now.
And so in that time, were you approaching things as an artist or an engineer? Like, was there a mix of both? Was it like you feeling like you were creating, or was like building the machine and the numbers and we sent out an email that got this click-through rate? Was it a mix of both? Like, how were you naturally wired and kind of what was coming out of that time?
At the time, it was not artist, it was more teacher. Whereas I took the responsibility of being a father seriously in terms of trying to be a model. And I distinctly remember before I went back to New Zealand, I made a commitment to give all my ideas away.
Right.
So I started accepting stuff that scared the shit out of me, like speaking gigs and those kind of things, which in hindsight was a great move.
Yeah.
Because when I wanted to leave, consulting and those things were not a problem, right? Because I built a profile and built a reputation in $100 million business.
Yeah, and I think around that time, I imagine you probably didn't have the scarcity that kicks in when you then start charging for your information. Because when you start charging for information, you're like, well, if I'm charging for it over here and I give it away over here, it must devalue the thing that people are buying.
Yeah.
But you didn't have that. You just had I'm in the trenches doing it and I'm just going to share it because that means no less for me if you know the thing that I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. And it means I don't have the struggle story of when I started consulting as well.
Right.
Like my first month, I invoiced $40,000.
Yeah, perfect.
Because I was mentored by senior people who were like, you go into companies, you tell them what to do, you hope they listen, and they pay your invoices every month.
Yeah. So the consulting journey, because that sounds like it evolved really naturally. You became really good in your industry. You got headhunted from UK to New Zealand. You rose up the ranks there. And then did that consulting naturally go to in-person consultation where you're working with a team in person? It's more corporate. C-suite type stuff.
Yeah, corporate, where I had a reputation as someone who was really comfortable sitting in a boardroom and talking the talk commercially, but also getting down in the trenches. Because I'd worked in startups, you had to be like that. You had to know how to run a Facebook ad.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't always someone there to do it. But you also had to know how to talk about a $10 million budget.
Yeah.
Right. So they're two different skill sets at the end of the spectrum. So I was quite useful to when some companies were going into like the scrappy kind of incubator stage. We're going to start up lots of internal tests and start businesses inside, where I go along and talk to them in corporate speak, but also startup speak, because they knew that I'd be happy to get my hand to roll my sleeves up and do stuff.
And so when you think back to that period, was that a seamless transition? Was that something that came with reservations or fears? Was there any sense of imposter syndrome? Because I know, like, working with people in the online space, and it's different when you go from, I'm using my Facebook for friends and family, and then all of a sudden I'm a business coach, and there's that element. But going from being the person who had a job, who was paid to do it, to now teaching other people, was there like things you had to overcome? Was there a story you had to unravel? Like, what was that kind of process like for you to actually get started?
The biggest thing for me was the discipline of it, because the work was so easy that I had to learn like lots of things to kind of pad it out, so there was a discipline of it, of like, is this actually, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right job? Because lots of people wouldn't even listen to the advice that I was giving them.
Yeah.
Right. So then you start to have the moral questions around it. But I had the easiest start to consulting ever, because I consulted back to the company that I was formerly a marketing director of.
Right.
So, it's like struggle to get your first client. sign the people you used to work with, and then start adding clients from there.
Yeah.
But the first major fear moment in terms of like taking a leap was stopping that.
Yeah.
Right. And going, I'm dependent on this single source of income. So if I stop it, then that was my first big fear. And I held on for like 4 months too long. And I had a coach at the time, and I'd sit there every Wednesday and she would, walk me through it. And
something about the weekly coaching sessions that's like a relic of old, we meet together for an hour. I drive to you, you drive to me. We do it on Zoom, whatever.
And making the decision you want to make, but are too scared to make it.
Yeah.
And seeking permission in some other way.
Yeah.
So the big fear was like leaving my first client, but that's when I met a young Sam Ovens.
Young Sam Ovens. I love it. We'll circle back to him in a second because obviously he played a crucial role for both of us.
He did, yeah.
But with you in the role that you're in, then being able to consult.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's nice for you, James, but I have to, get clients and I don't have that. But also for you, I imagine there was years, like behind the scenes, you're kind of skimming over the fact that I imagine there was a lot of really deep skill set building throughout that time. Like it wasn't just like right place, right time.
Yeah.
I could talk the talk. I imagine there was the hours of podcasts, the blogs, the, whatever it might be. Like what did that process of actually building the skill set? So like the company that you worked for, they still had to see enough value in what you did to want to pay you the money you charged. What was that process like to build that skill set?
Work.
Right.
Like I developed a deep skill set across sales and marketing specifically by doing it.
Yeah.
Right. In the trenches
which started
of doing it.
Door to door.
Yeah. It started door to door.
Right.
It had blue chip sales, Vodafone, BMW and Xerox, like sales training, which is Xerox sales training in Europe is considered to be like the best sales training on earth.
Right.
Like, relationship building and those things from corporate enterprise all the way down to selling phones in a shop.
Yeah.
At Vodafone when I worked in New Zealand when I was a student. And it's getting the skills on but also, and I think I'm more ruthless about these days, it's like focusing on what you're good at. Because there's so much idealism around skill acquisition because everything's a skill.
Yeah.
And it's really like, okay, double down on what you're good at and largely ignore the bits that you aren't. And that's a tough lesson to learn. Like I was a terrible people manager.
Right.
And I inherited these teams and I didn't know how to manage.
We're going to run ads, guys. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah. But I'd lean in on the commercials, on the marketing, on, the detail of those things.
Yeah.
And go back to there. And the results will always take you through. You don't have to be the easiest person to work with.
Yeah.
You don't even have to be liked. But if you're effective, you can go a really long way.
Right.
So I think I always focused on things I was effective at and avoided out of probably internal fear all the things I was proving to be bad at.
Yeah. Which I think is also underrated. Like I think too many people try to generalize too fast.
Yeah, I've shamed myself horribly for that over the years of like, no, I should build a team.
Yeah, of course.
I should be a good manager. I should be this, I should be that. And it doesn't matter how hard you wish for it. If there's no true, genuine desire there, it's very difficult to acquire skills when you don't have desire behind them.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to, I really want to be good at this and I need to be good at this when there's no actual want, like deep inside you to want to do it.
Well, I think we'll come back to this, but like this idea that business needs to be hard is a really prevalent one, because I think business is already hard because we have to grow and gain skills and stick at things and develop character traits that allow us to focus on one thing for a really long time. But then people also make it unnecessarily hard. They go, well, I'm not good at this, so I must get better at it because, I don't want to have a weak link in the chain. I don't want to have a hole in the bucket. But like, man, I mean, we have friends who have great businesses and suck at like huge parts of it. Right, and they either hire around themselves.
We have multimillionaire friends who can barely tie their shoes.
Yeah.
Like that's a reality.
Yeah.
And I'm useless at some very normal
we talk about
tasks.
this with life admin, right?
Yeah.
Like I would way rather be hit with a $100,000 tax bill and have to figure that out over the next month than organize a youth camp. The scale of the problem is significantly different, but the complexity, or even just like if you peel it back, if I had to like buy our groceries every week and things like that, it sounds such a luxury, but like those things stress me out, like those everyday things. But so many entrepreneurs think they need to master it all. Like I need to have all of the things sorted. I need to be good at marketing, sales, I need to be the best dad, the best husband. And then that means I need to tick all of the stereotypical things. I need to be amazing at sitting down and playing with my kids with Lego for hours at a time. I need to have the lawns mowed, the hedge trimmed, the whatever else. But you bring that to business, it's the same deal.
My take is that it's a product of weaponizing shame.
Right.
And it starts at a young age because the system needs people to be in a certain way and compliant with doing those things and productive. And we've weaponized shame, and now we've amplified it with this thing called the internet to say, if you don't want these things, you're not normal and there's something wrong with you. If you don't want to be like this, if you don't want to spend your days like that, if you don't believe these things, then there's something morally wrong with you and we're going to shame you.
Yeah.
And it's weaponized everywhere. Yeah. And it's weaponized often by the people that are closest to the recipient of that shame.
Right.
Because they're like, you should want this. Like, I was asked by people who came to visit a couple of weeks ago, as we're sitting in our house with our staff, everybody here has local staff. We have a family. It's
true, guys. Come to Bali.
And they're like, how do you feel about these people serving you? And I was like, amazing. Amazing. Yeah. Because this family have a house here. They've got vehicles. They send their kids to school. Their son's getting a higher education because they work for me and they love my kids just like they're their own. It feels great. But that's just one example of things that be like, well, you shouldn't have people serve you. Yet, as an entrepreneur, your time is the only scarce thing on earth. Unless you yield it properly with the skill set that you were either innately given and amplified, you are going to fail to create the most value you possibly can. So you should be ashamed of doing the things you're bad at and doing the things that you shouldn't actually be doing, because it's going to cost you and it's going to cost the people who depend on you.
Yeah. And this is, we'll get to it in a second, but let's talk about Sam Ovens. Because he went through that period, which is kind of what my mind is going to now. But most people listening will know who the heck Sam was.
Yeah.
But before there was the Sam of the internet, there was the Sam of New Zealand. And they were not the same person.
I met the Sam of New Zealand, right?
Yeah, so talk us through who that person was. By the way, if anyone wants to go down a fun rabbit hole, search Sam Ovens stuff.co.nz. There's like a picture of his penthouse apartment. I think it's like 2014. He's right in the Auckland Viaduct in the harbour. He's got a zebra, a rug, a motorcycle, a pistol, like all of these like antiques and things like that around his house. And he's just the cool dude of Auckland. But like, who was this guy that you met at that time?
So I was kind of in that transition. So I was still consulting for the main guys, and I was still kind of acting marketing director, but I wasn't actually employed by them. So I was right on the cusp of it. And I was like, I'm going out consulting, And I reached out to him because he'd been on Mixergy.
Oh, yeah.
With Snap Inspect. And
his software company.
His software company at the time. And I met this extremely confident, snot-nosed kid. Really, that's what I thought when I walked away, because he's 10 years, 12 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And I was like, big swinging dick. You know, I work for the fastest growing company in the country. Like, you know, you've got it all worked out. But I was like kind of enthralled by his confidence and his vision about, I just do consulting to generate cash flow to build the software company. And at the time, the software company was the main thing. And
his software company, for anyone who doesn't know, was an app for property managers.
Property inspection.
Inspection, yeah.
It was really good. Like, I'm not a property manager, but you could take fixtures and it solved a real pain problem. It still exists. And he's like, yeah, since the interview, lots of people reached out, talk about, you know, because he kind of alluded to this, doing consulting to generate cash flow for other things, or because that was his kind of angle at the time, and that's what he was doing. And he said, I'm starting a thing. And at the time, it was like a Dropbox folder full of stuff, and he was just putting it online in Kajabi. Right. And I signed up like months later when it was actually a proper product. I think he had about 20 people.
Well, do you remember all those details? $6,000. Yeah. And this is 2014?
So he did me a solid though. He did it in New Zealand dollars.
Oh, my man.
He did at the time. That was like very welcome.
Yeah.
Because I think $6,000 US at the time was like 10 grand Kiwi or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, don't tell anyone, but I'll do it in Kiwi dollars. I'm like, thanks, bro.
Yeah. And this was 2014? 2015?
No, it was later than that.
Right.
No, about 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be about 2014, 2015.
Yeah. So he's based in New Zealand. Consulting is a side hustle, and you kind of get into this Dropbox community of like, there's some trainings, there's no consulting accelerator that many people would have experienced later.
Yeah.
And what was that experience like? Because at this point, I imagine you're still consulting in person.
I was still consulting in person, and we moved to Waiheke Island off Auckland. And so I was starting commuting, and I was like, I've got a job again. I've got a flipping job again.
Right.
And because it was like single source of income, have to get up, have to go to a place, have to stay there, have to come back.
You're going to hop on a boat to get to Auckland.
Boat.
Yeah, like for anyone who doesn't know, Waiheke Island is not connected via a bridge. It's like a 45 minute.
Yeah, 35. Yeah,
35-minute ferry, and it's a beautiful lifestyle on there. But then to have to go to the CBD or wherever you're going every day,
it drained me real quick.
Yeah.
And after having all those ideas set in my head, and then that kind of sub track playing in the background through podcasts and things of freedom and location independence and digital nomadism, I needed to do my own thing. And so through Sam's course, I launched my first product, e-commerce engine, and then we did $1 million in, it was about 13 months.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Talk about timing as well, like unfair advantages, like back in the day when you could get leads for $1 on Facebook and like calls for $50.
Yeah.
But literally just, got on the phone. First price point was $2,500.
Yeah.
Then put it up to $6,000 later.
So walk me through that process. So you've got all this expertise you've built in person. He tells you how to package it into a course, or are you coaching one-to-one? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, like the classic, course with calls model that I call it now. Like I had a Google Drive folder with 6 modules in it and like an introduction.
Yeah.
A free Facebook group. No, sorry, a Facebook group, which is obviously free but paid for clients.
Yeah.
And then a weekly call with what was it called on GoToWebinar?
Oh goodness, yeah,
it's like $400 a month at the time, man.
Yeah, that's crazy. We don't know how good we've got now.
It was great.
Yeah.
And e-commerce then was really fragmented, so it was like pre-Shopify. So it was really like people had all these different. It wasn't pre-Shopify, but it was like early. It wasn't a big thing like it is now, like the de facto solution for e-com.
Yeah.
So all these people had all these like different platforms, and the tech stuff was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
So to give them like email templates and cart abandon sequences and conversion and Facebook ad templates, it was a brand new thing at the time to that market. It was like, what, you give me stuff that works out of the box, and I just go and copy and paste it, and you help me modify it, and I use it, and it makes money. Yeah, cool.
And so that was the most natural people for you to work with, I guess, having come from Grab One and Groupon.
Yeah.
Was you're now just in that e-commerce space. You're not a coach helping coaches get clients. It's literally like you have an e-commerce store. Yeah. It sucks.
I'd seen $3 billion of e-commerce transactions flow past my eyeballs.
Yeah.
So I was like, I know how to make people buy stuff online.
Yeah. So what was that learning curve like going online?
The biggest learning curve was just the deployment of it, because I thought I had to know all the tech and all those things, the ClickFunnels templates and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's all the stuff that tripped me up.
Sorry guys, quick technical difficulty. I had a camera that overheated. We are back in the game. So we're talking about you coaching online e-commerce and talking about the learning curve. And so the biggest challenge for you at that time was the deployment, like the actually getting the stuff done. Yeah. Going through all the steps.
Yeah, well, it's the stuff that you think you need that you don't really.
Yeah.
And like the first iteration of that course was like, I've got to get this done, screw it. So that's why I used like Google Drive and a Facebook group. And, because I was sick of pissing around and procrastinating on myself for going, I need to host it in an online thing.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing you see now with, I need all this stuff to make it look a certain way.
Yeah.
So I was much more worried about what people thought about it than...
Was that something that you were getting from Sam as well at the time, meaning like you bought into a program that was awesome in Dropbox? Because I'm sure at that time there were some people out there.
It just changed it, so I was on the cusp of like, there was still stuff stored there.
Yeah.
And I think the first iteration was just a tree of files. And then there was, the Kajabi stuff and videos. And again, it was like building it as we were going through it.
Yeah.
The first version up level.
Well, I think one of the best, I don't know if he said this out loud or if this was just something I took from Consulting Accelerator, but when I started in 2018, I had skills that I could transfer to marketing, but I had no marketing experience per se. I had no ads experience, no funnels. And so I was really good at sales. Yeah. So I was like getting people to say yes and then going, all right, now I need to figure out how to do this. And I'll never forget just the belief I got from going through his program was like, I need to believe my ability to figure it out. So I'll never forget getting a client, and I was doing something around his content, and then he hired me to do his Facebook ads. Yeah. And my confidence came from the fact that Sam had all the modules on Facebook ads in there, even though I hadn't gone through them and never run a Facebook ad. So I run this client's card, and he's like, yeah, man, really need these ads to work. And I'm like, they're going to be amazing, right? And then I go through all of Sam's stuff and then overnight, and then at 5 a.m. I launch the client's ads, and then the next morning I wake up however many hours later, and he's got all of these webinar registrations and it's crushing. But for me, it was like that delusion that even though I didn't have the expertise, I could borrow it from someone else. Yeah. And also I needed to believe my ability to figure it out. And I think That's a belief that served me so much. I don't know if there was anything around that time that kind of carried you through belief-wise. Can you remember what your self-talk was in that time? Because you were going from in-person to online, you're running ads. People were now probably talking crap on your ads, and you're now an expert selling a product. Like, what was that self-talk like?
It was a complete paradox because I was the big deal. I was a marketing director of like the fastest growing company in the country. So it was a paradox of like, this small fry internet little tiny stuff was like, who cares?
Right.
What's the big deal? But the ego was the thing that was preventing me from doing the stuff I needed to do because it didn't look right.
Right.
So both of those opposing forces got me stuck, right? In terms of not launching it fast enough, not hitting the ground running. Because when I did, it was like, it was off straight away. So there was a paradox of like, I'm really good. Look at this. This stuff's little. It's so easy. I could phone it in.
Yeah.
But also, I needed it to look a certain way because I was worried what people would think. You got a brand to worry about.
You got a reputation. You've got. Yeah, I get it.
So it was like the worst paradox you can get because the two opposing forces, if they're equal, you're just stuck in place.
Yeah.
And I was for months.
Stuck in place doing what? Like, were you doing the equivalent of like, I'm building a website for myself?
I was doing the equivalent of like, I'm going to move these boxes around on this landing page and like do the slides for that VSL video again.
Yeah.
And by Friday it will be done. Oh no, I should change that word.
Right.
You know, perfectionist procrastination.
Yeah.
Because I was worried about what people would think about it.
Which I think is human nature. Like I think there'll be a lot of people listening who laugh at something like that and go, oh, I remember those days, or that's so funny. But most of my coaching calls are dealing with people, even at multiples in figures, who are just overthinking stuff. They're in a kind of that loop of productive procrastination. I'm not like, this is one of the things I've learned about entrepreneurs. Normal people, when they're overwhelmed or unclear, right? Normies, right? They don't do anything, right? So that's why when you talk to normal people, the everyday person around procrastination, it's such a huge topic because they're struggling with inaction. Most entrepreneurs struggle with too much action. They're actually taking so much action in so many different directions that it's the thing causing them to not move forward because they're productively procrastinating. Right? So instead of me creating the module, I'm going to listen to 10 podcasts and 5 of the best YouTube videos on it and read 3 books on it so that I create the perfect podcast or the perfect module or the whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that version of what you went through of I'm trying to get the landing page perfect is the same thing that everyone goes through. It just looks different. It looks more mature, but it's the same behavior and that same, whether it's scarcity or insecurity or inadequacy driving people for like, I'm just waiting for it to be perfect. Right? That sense of perfectionism that people wrestle with.
Fully. I think also that there's also, as you grow up, there's a creation of optionality. Get this thing so you can get that thing. You know, get the qualification so you can get the job. So if you create options for yourself, if you create more options for yourself, it's better. The reality is very different. The more options just lead you to more noise in the system to say, well, what's the actual signal? And because it's the hardest question to answer, what do I want? Right? So that you get more options to get things that other people want that you think you should want. So then you just get stuck because you're dealing with your own internal procrastination, but you're also looking at the wants of others and going, maybe I should want that. Maybe what I want isn't good enough.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's that whole idea of people are suffering from the silent disease of confusion or lack of clarity is so true.
Yeah.
Right. Most people just do not know what they want. Or if they know what they want, they don't know why they want it. Oh, you want to get to 50K a month? Why? Sounds great. 100K a month. I would love to shake Russell Brunson's hand, but they don't have a vision that's fueled by a motivation that will actually push them through. And so they're just stuck in cycles of like, I think the pod at the end of the rainbow is going to be awesome and it's going to be at 50K a month, and then you get there and it's not there.
Yeah.
People don't typically have a clear vision with a clear motivation that's actually going to push them through the different seasons.
Yeah, I also see that there's also the other C. There's a lack of consequence.
Right. Yeah.
There's we love clarity, but we also act on consequence. And an example would be in our friends group at the moment, lots of parents in their 40s, and a couple of people have died of heart attacks. Right. In their 40s. Too early, too young, and it is prompted lots of people to look at their genetic line, get tested, heart health, diet, all those things. But until then, everyone was carrying on eating the fried food and doing all the things because there's no obvious consequence to the behavior. And people go, oh, you want to live a long time for your kids, and they sound nice in a theoretical way, but when it comes to it, fried chips taste nice, and beer is good sometimes, right. But I think it's also consequence. In comfort, there's very little consequence.
Yeah.
There's very little consequence to not doing the thing.
Yeah.
And this is why I see so many entrepreneurs driven by the darkness, driven by that dark thing of like, I've got to prove my dad wrong.
Yeah, I was bullied when I was young.
That teacher, who said that I was never going to amount to anything, and when I was 14, I mean, the seeds of that are there.
Yeah.
And the consequence of not doing it is more internal pain.
Yeah.
And the benefit of doing it is some misaligned view that will provide relief from that pain.
Yeah.
And so I think consequence motivates most action, and you don't need to be clear about something to do it.
Yeah.
Because clarity is a fiction. In COVID, everyone was like, wow, well, this is really, we didn't see this coming. And it's like, we never see the future coming.
Yeah,
it's a ludicrous analogy because it's like, we didn't see the future coming before COVID, and we don't see the future coming during it and after.
Yeah.
And these ideas. You can't even say COVID. You got to get it out.
Oh, the jibby jab,
the thing that happened in 2020. But there's this idea that clarity needs to be present before we take action. There's an idea that belief needs to be present to take action. And I was sharing with clients recently of like, I need so little evidence now to believe in something. Like, we call it instinct, and we call these like accumulated wisdom and all this stuff. But I see something working once, and I'm like, I'm going to do a lot more of this.
Yeah.
And I think as you go along, you don't need as much belief because you can pattern match some things and go, well, this is like this, so I'm going to do more of it.
Right.
And you don't need belief and clarity to do it, but you need some consequence to make you move. Otherwise, you ain't doing it.
Isn't that fascinating to think about? Like the amount of convincing you need to start a business versus the amount of convincing you need to launch a new offer. Right? Like people can convince themselves in a heartbeat to go, I need to launch a new tripwire, a new funnel, whatever. But to get over that hump of belief around, I have something to give of value, is this huge insurmountable thing. Do you feel like that's a skill set? Is that a belief in and of itself? Like what is that actually enables you and us, the further we get along, to take faster action, to stop living in the place of overthinking and inaction? Like what is that?
I think it's giving gratitude to the changes you've made and not judging them. I think something I do with clients quite a bit who have that belief that their stuff isn't good enough or they're going to not put an offer out there is go back and let them mine the past. Really look at the work they've done and the magic that you've created through an accumulated lived life. And you don't even need to be that old to have done stuff. Most of the people I work with tend to be older with kids and those kind of things. So there's more accumulated experience. But I think if you go back and mine what you've done, and then you link the human story to the impact of that, I had a client a while ago who was, it was property finding. He's like, I just find people houses. Yeah, but who lives in those houses? What families are made? What decisions are made? And those things. It's like, it's not in, and if you link the outcomes of what you've done in the past to the human impact of things, it makes it much more real than just a transaction or money, because those things are fictional. They're made up. We made all the stuff up just to ease the wheels of commerce.
Money's made up.
Yeah, well, it literally is, right?
Yeah.
But if we link the benefits to the impact that we've had on other people, we can actually start to display empathy and have emotion to say, well, no, I actually did something that was worth it. I did something that was valuable.
Right.
Because everyone's got a legacy. And if we actually learn to appreciate the legacy, we can turn a lot of those things into motivation to do things now. To say, well, no, if this only helps one person, it's good enough. I write like that.
Yeah.
I speak to one person. People go, oh, you're a good writer. And it's like, because I'm writing to one person at a time. And if it helps one person, great. If it helps 100, even better.
And that's one of the things I think that's really fascinating is the further I get along in this journey, the simpler everything feels in my brain.
Yeah.
Like when you are running a Facebook ad, you feel like you were trying to, I didn't understand the mechanics of what I was trying to do. I was like, there is an algorithm and there is an ad, and there are all of these masses of people that I'm trying to like get on their screen and get them to click, rather than going like, I'm trying to target John, who's probably sitting on the loo.
Who's a human.
Right. Yeah. Who has this distinct like current situation, this desired situation. I'm just trying to motivate him to click. I don't think I was thinking ever that personal. It felt so complex. And then now over time, it's like, this is easy. This is simple. Like marketing is so simple, right?
Yeah.
But it's something that you have to work through, right? You said earlier, simplicity comes through complexity.
Yeah.
Right? Like oftentimes we have to go through the complex and the hard to get to the simple and the easy.
Yeah.
So when you launched, right, circling back, you were coaching on e-commerce. You're working with Slick Sam Ovens. You're going through his course. You said you did $1 million in 13 months. You obviously didn't stay in that niche or that business model without going through the linear journey of every kind of 6 months, how did it change and what it looked like. You've evolved tons. Like there has been so many different twists and turns. You've had the good and the bad like I have. Like I'll never forget being in Manly, and the business that you had then was so radically different and so not a fit for you at that time compared to the business that, you know, Waiheke James was crushing and cranking 18 months earlier. And so when you think about going from e-commerce to the next market to the next offer, obviously there are metrics like, I don't so much want to focus on the, you know, an offer gets tired, a funnel gets tired, and so we launch something new. But what does that journey look like and felt like for you in it? Like, was it a reflection of your personal growth? Was it that you were growing as a human being and all of a sudden the old business model didn't feel like it fit? Like, what did the evolution of the business models in the kind of last 6 to 8 years look and feel like for you?
Autistic. No, like seriously, I say it with, you know, a smile on my face, but I'm a highly sensitive person. And so my journey was essentially mimicking the things I was paying attention to, or the mentors or the people, persons of esteem or authority that I was looking at the time. Yeah. And then I was just becoming derivatives of them. Right. But I'm a successful mimic, which is, again, a challenging place because I was really good at mimicking because I could make it effective by just tweaking it enough to make it my own. And then the feedback loop will be successful. I can make $1 million a year. Great. But I topped out at 2 because I couldn't mimic my way through the next curve because I didn't want to, because I was mimicking someone else's life and business model and even probably personality sometimes that wasn't actually mine.
Right.
So I capped out because I was playing a role that I needed to play, and then the internet, in terms of the thing that I thought people saw of me of a brand, then trapped me in it. Well, I have to keep pretending like I really want to do this because I've got people paying me money to play this character on the internet. Right. So hindsight, it was just mimicry, just really successful mimicry. And there's a huge benefit to modeling, but mimicry will always run you into the wall because mimicry gets you so close to the person's personality, beliefs, and those things that it's always going to challenge what you actually believe and who you really are.
It's actually such a subtle but important difference, the idea of modeling versus mimicking.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to Dylan, who runs all of our content, and I was like, dude, the things that we're trying to do right now have already been done. Like, we don't have to get innovative and creative and go like, we're pioneering something. It's like, dude, let's look at Gary Vee. Let's look at the people that have been way ahead of where we are, and let's at least start modeling what they're doing. What I'm not saying is let's take their top 10 thumbnails and go, these are ours now, right? I'm just going, how do they shoot? What angles? What does it look like? what does that documenting versus creating process look like? But mimicking is interesting because I would say like I have had both past and present massive like dad issues, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of like coaching for me was finding guys that held some mentorship place in my life that I could then like hook my horse to their carriage and go like, I'm going to follow this person. I'm going to become more like this person. And that served me really well in some instances, you know, where I'm like, I don't think I ever got the blue blazer in the New York apartment, you know, like Sam. But there was that sense of like, I would listen to how Sam thought or talked, and I would go, oh, I'm too expressive. I need to be more thoughtful. I need to be more structured. He was churning out 13-hour days and then planning tomorrow, today, and doing all these different things. And I would try them, and it would be like wearing someone else's clothes, like, you know.
Yeah.
And yet there's so much value in modeling. And so how do you think about it now? Like having gone through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because you and I still work with coaches, and we learn from people. I think these days I need to pay people less to get glean from them. There are people I've never paid that I listen to their stuff. Or there's a guy called Zane Lowe. Love his interviews. He's in the music space. He's mentoring me in a way from afar. But how do you think about that idea of modeling and mentorship now, as opposed to the mimicking you were doing? Like, what's a healthy version of that look like for you now?
This comes back to the reality of my life and the consequences piece, which is like, I'm a full-time dad and I don't have any time. So I have to have constraints. I have to design from constraints. And when you're mimicking, you design from desire or want to be like that person or have the things that you perceive them to have. I can no longer do that because I have to have constraints of it. So I have to design from a place of, I need to design my model based on the reality of what I see around me, which is my kids and the other things that are immediately important. So it's been a forced change that I have to do those things because time is scarce, energy is scarce. So I have to choose a model which works for me, and there is no compromise on that because there's too many consequences of compromising. And I think when you mimic, there's much less social. There's more social because people always find you out, right?
Yeah.
They always go, you're just like so-and-so. You're just like, well, the market doesn't reward you after a time because you're like, are you like them or are you like this? So you just, it's not good business sense because you end up being like everybody else and competition kills the profits. So I think about models now much more from a way of, I have to do this in this way to preserve these things because the consequence of me not doing it are too dire.
And I think one of the things I've learned is if you take advice, the what or the how from someone with a different why, you can end up building a business that becomes more like a prison and less like the...
How often do we see that?
Oh, dude, this is what's fascinating is that like most of the most popular entrepreneurial figures in our space who give the seemingly best business advice have completely different goals from the 99% watching them. So when you're watching someone who is trying to like literally get into the upper echelon of any human financially in all of history, and you're trying to make $10,000 a month, they might have great advice, but it's coming from a different place. And some of that advice is not for you because you have different goals. Yeah. If you want to be a millionaire versus a billionaire, I don't think people understand the complete different stratosphere that lives in. I think the stat is like, well, not the stat, but the number is like 1 million seconds is 11 days ago. A billion seconds is 32 years ago. Right? So when people are taking advice from someone who's trying to have $1,000 million, it's such a different why. It's such a different drive. When we mimic someone like that, we might experience some level of progress and even your business might grow. But then you have a business that you want to run away from more than you're excited to run because it doesn't align with your values. And I think one of the things that's been really helpful for me, and I feel like I've been picking mentors and models so much better in this kind of last season, is because I've been connecting with people's whys much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So does this person share my values? Do they share my outlook on life? Do they share my worldview? I'm not looking for 100% agreement. I'm looking for alignment.
Yeah.
Right. I'm looking for a sense of, if you give me advice, I know it's coming from the place that you understand I'm a parent, or you understand I'm married, or you understand I want to stay married, or all of those things. And so how have you gone about picking people to learn from? Because I think that's a challenge, whether you've got a credit card in hand and you're going to sign up to a program, or whether you are choosing to dedicate an hour of your day kind of listening to people. How do you think about like the who do I learn from, who do I give time to, who do I model from?
It's all about the relative constraints again. Like I know lots of really smart, mainly young dudes, right? You're one of them, and I know lots of them. You're a little bit different to the 25-year-old Twitter bros who are really smart. Yeah. Really smart. And they're doing the right things and the fundamentals are there. But their life is different to mine. It's different to yours, right? So it's like, do these people actually understand the map's fine, but the terrain is very different, right? So do people actually understand the terrain you're sitting on in your real life? Because everything works. Every business model that you and I come into contact with can be made to work. In some cases, you shouldn't want them to work, but everything works. But the map and the terrain are different things. So for me, it's like, where is this person coming from? And it does come back to those core principles now, and values, and increasingly these days track record, because the internet has distorted so much of what we see as true and false. It's like, okay, and we've linked also financial success and performance with some level of higher morality.
Right.
Oh yeah, well I'm going to listen to them because they're rich.
Right.
It's like, that's very binary in a way to do it. So I think to answer the question, it's about nuance of saying, what's the circumstance of those people? Where's it coming from? What's the overall goal and vision of that? And how do you do that? How do you do that in a way that's applicable to me? And then living that. I ran a workshop the other day, and I started with all the principles. I started with like how I think about things and where I come from, and some very complicated things. It wasn't like hyper tactical, and I'm unapologetic about that. They're like, I want to teach you the principles so you don't need me.
Right.
I don't want trauma bonds and codependency with clients. Right?
You don't want to be like,
I got enough of my own. I don't need any more of them.
Yeah.
So I come from a place of like, I don't want you to need me. And that, I think, in terms of like paying attention to people who are doing it that way, and then paying attention to how I'm doing it. And if those things sync up, then I'm generally on the right track. And I think it's the reason why we haven't recorded these conversations. I think the primary reason is we know that it would slightly distort and dilute some of the things we say and some of the angles we have. Yeah. Because there's a performative element in all human nature.
Yeah, I'm even I'm struggling to get comfortable in this chair. I'm normally facing you directly.
We tumble ideas around, and we know each other's lives like very, very well in terms of the bigger picture. You weren't even here when I arrived. I'm sitting in there chatting to Liv and the boys and those things.
And checking out the chickens.
Yeah, those relationships are, they're priceless and valuable to me, because it's like, I know you. Yeah. I know the business Dan. I like your posts on Facebook and watch your videos sometimes. Yeah. On double speed. Yeah, there we go. But, who's the person? Yeah. What are they doing? What's their values? What do they believe? And we're going to change along the way, because stuff happens that you never see coming.
Well, I think this is the interesting piece around the space that we play in, right? Online coaching, consulting, marketing, this creator economy, whatever we want to call it. We've seen it drastically evolve, right? Yeah. You could have a funnel, and that was it. Like, maybe you would have a few posts on your Facebook page. So if someone clicked on your ad, you didn't look like a ghost. But literally, we were taught a model that worked really well, which was you run an ad to a stranger, they click on a landing page, the landing page has a big promise. You enter your details, you come through the video, there's a rags to riches story, there's a problem, there's a solution, there's an invite to a call. 1 in 20 people book the call, and then 1 in 5 people close. Yeah. Right? And that can still work to a degree, but one of the things that I'm seeing is the era of the personal brand is upon us.
It is.
Where content is now a filtering mechanism to go, is this my person? Because in 2016, if you were a consultant struggling to get clients, you were desperate for solutions, and there were very few around, right? Sam Ovens pops up in your feed and he goes, how to get 42 clients in 69 days, or whatever it might be. I can't remember his hook. And it was like, it was new, it was fresh. How are we going to get clients automated? Now there are so many people who say the exact same things as us, and we think if we just outspend them in ads, if we just out funnel them, out follow up, then we're going to win. But the reality is that people are looking for depth with us, I think, now, because they realize it wasn't business to business, business to consumer, it's human to human. And now that there is ample competition and there's red ocean, right? It's about now, like that saying I heard Kevin Kelly say recently, it's like, don't be the best, be the only. The model a few years ago was just be the best, right? It was just like, how do you make the biggest claim? How do you run the best ads? And now it's like, how do you create a connection that no one else can replicate, because it's you connecting with someone else? Yeah. And I was talking to a client yesterday, and he said something really kind. He said, like, the best decision I've made in the last year of my business was hiring you, but I hired you different to every other coach I've ever worked with. Every other coach I worked with was, I had a problem and they had a solution. I asked myself before I hired you, do I want to become more like Dan? And because I answered yes, I've worked with you and it's been amazing, because you're actually taking me more in the direction of the person I want to become, not just the, I'm a square peg and that's a square hole, and And so I think that's a really fascinating like nuance to this whole conversation, because I think there are a lot of creators and consultants and coaches stuck in the old model that if I can just outmarket, if I can do a launch or a 5-day challenge without creating real deep intimacy with the audience, they get stuck. They can't outspend the fact that the people just don't trust them the way they used to. What do you think people should be thinking about, whether it's doing a podcast, whether it's writing posts on Facebook? How do you think about cultivating that sense of a personal brand now, as opposed to, you're one funnel away?
Yeah, I think something that I've got clients recently doing is writing intention documents for themselves, to a piece of self-discovery that gets down to what they really want and what is enough, and not being shamed around that. In an industry where everything's like 7 figures this and 7 figures that, people coming back with 6-figure goals, that they internally shame themselves for that, despite that being like profoundly impactful on them and have constraints around it, right?
Yeah.
And then in many cases they've shared those intention documents with their audience. People want to know who you're becoming, right? They want to know where you're going, because the true north now is the person behind it. And we've understood that this filter of the internet is just as can apply a filter that people can say and do anything at the time. But unless you're very clear about who you're becoming and who you're following, then that same mimic and sensitivity that that I fell victim to in a successful financial way is going to come to fruition, because they've already got experience following people that they didn't want to become, doing things that they didn't want to do, and they were attracted by the glitz, and now they want to know, who are you? Where do you think you're going? And I'm okay with you reserving the right to change your mind, as long as these basic principles and these values are still consistent.
Yeah.
Because that's all people want. They just want consistency with those things.
Yeah.
They don't want the rug pulled from under them to say, oh, actually it was all a scam and it was all, morally ambiguous, and they don't really have those values. That's why we look at when people get caught doing things that are underhanded, who have a high moral standing in society. We have that look, because if you undermine certain values, then you can never be trusted again.
And it's funny because, again, it comes back to that idea of, we give people credibility where they haven't earned it based on status.
Yeah.
This is funny in crypto, right? It's like people were surprised that crypto rug pulls happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, you trusted this person because they had 100,000 followers on Twitter and had been tweeting for 6 months about this amazing project they're going to have. Or maybe they had a personal brand. As a successful trader, they launch something, and then all of a sudden they rug, you lose money, they make money, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought you were supposed to be this person. But they'd not necessarily ever shown themselves to be a person who was had integrity in this area. It was just that they were successful, and we made that synonymous with trustworthy. Whereas, like, if you've been like, I was asked yesterday, how many posts have you put on Facebook, do you think? I was like, man, I mean, maybe it averages out at 1 a day for 5 years, not including stories, not including any other platform. Like, it's 1,000 plus. And I consistently have people who come into my world and in short times become clients. But the more common theme I see is, I've been following you for years. So I remember when you finished being a youth pastor, or like the compounding effect of the audience and the way that people trust you over time is just so invaluable. And I think like it's an interesting thing to observe, because some coaches and consultants are kind of caught with their pants down going, but I thought I could just run a 5-day challenge. I didn't want to really share my life online. And I think it's an interesting place, because I'm really enjoying the journey, but many people aren't. Many people are going like, I just want to run the ads and have the webinar funnel, and I didn't sign up to be anyone's guru. And it's like, well, you're a coach. You kind of did. Yeah. Like, if you're asking for thousands of dollars from someone, like, they need to know they can trust you. You can't just give them to a closer and a really awesome 45-minute sales pitch gets them in. They kind of want to know who they're doing business with. Yeah. If there's so many different choices, why should they choose you? Yeah. Why should they work with you? And that's why vlogging and podcasts and just content in general, I think is so powerful when it comes to building audience, because it's easy to pretend for a video. It's really hard to keep the act up over weeks and months and years and dozens of pieces of content.
Yeah, there is a barrier even to the way that you've used the word audience there, and I'll pick up on this. There is a barrier to people getting started with the belief that audience equals mass.
Right.
That audience equals a large amount of attention. if you go back on my journey, my first client, I had an audience of 1. They became a client.
Yeah.
Because of what factor? Trust, right? So in the internet world where we're looking at vanity metrics like views and likes and things that are en masse, we over-index on the size of attention we think we need, and we under-index on trust. And that's what's happening in the rebalancing now towards the kind of creator economy and the personal brand and these things, because we're trying to rebalance trust. That you can grow a really big business and impactful one off a tiny, tiny audience if you have the highest levels of trust in that audience. So something that stops people is this idea that you need a big audience.
Right.
Because you only need an audience of 1 person in a relevant way who trusts you to actually do anything.
Yeah.
And the more they trust you, the more intimacy that's already been achieved. So the more implicitly you understand how you're useful to them on the journey you go on. So I think the idea of audience stops a lot of people just as much as it kind of helps people, but we go to audience and we look at the mass market.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody is in the kind of media business now to some extent. Everybody's streaming this and, reeling that and TikToking this. I'll make myself sound like an old man. Yeah. Because we've got an audience of something. And it always makes me laugh how much traction people can get with tiny little audiences who trust them.
Yeah. What's that belief that I don't have an audience or a list? And you're like, do you know humans? Like go through
That's an audience.
Yeah, go
it's
through
literally
your phone
an audience.
contacts. Yeah, literally boom, boom, boom. Like, and if they aren't the right person, they probably know the right person, right?
It's all concentric circles.
Yeah.
It's all concentric circles out. But we look at it as one big giant one, as an audience. And that dehumanizes everything in it, which just goes back to the point we were talking about before. Everybody's lost the humanity in marketing because it used to be person to person. And then it went media, printed media, physical media, and then it went digital. So we talk about an audience and we forget there's humans inside. And it's madness.
Well, we think about it like a market, like a niche.
Yeah.
Like chiropractors.
Like they're all created equal.
Yeah.
Like there's this just 100 faces all lined up and they all look the same.
Yeah.
And I just need to sell to 5 of them because they're my audience.
Yeah.
They're humans, right?
Yeah.
And the humanity has gone out of marketing and persuasion and these things because everybody forgets there's a human on the other side of the action that you're taking and the message that you're taking. And that concept has served me so well in writing and creating for things. And it's like the interaction that you get on, and we've talked about this before, the vanity metrics that you get on stuff that actually moves the needle, builds a relationship, makes money, and those pieces, it's often, there's an inverse correlation. You do the posts with 150 likes on your Facebook feed, and it does nothing. Yeah. It doesn't impact anybody because everybody just piles on to say, good job.
Yeah.
But you do the one that got 4 likes and someone messages you and said, oh my God, that thing that you said there, you really cut through to me, and you got a person at a certain place and a time, you actually touched a human. But we've become obsessed with the mass. We've become obsessed with needing this audience thing, when reality is everybody has one.
Yeah, it's not about, and I think a better way to even reframe it is like, you don't need an audience, you need connection with people. Yeah. And that group of like...
It'd be better if we just got rid of the word.
Yeah. Guys, we've eliminated it now.
We've got rid of it. Beep it out.
But I read the other day, and it kind of summarized thoughts I'd had for a long time, which is like, if you want to create a deep connection with the audience, go narrow. If you want to create a big audience, go wide. And I think one of the things that's really fascinating to me is how much money I've made that you've made from relatively small audiences. Like we have friends who are like, I've got clients who are influencers.
Yeah.
They have 100 times the amount of followers that I have and make a fraction of the money because they've gone wide and have a big audience, but they don't have a deep connection with the audience they have. Yeah. And that's where I think like that's so encouraging to me, because for anyone who is looking to get started or restarted or has lost momentum, it comes back to the one. Like, how can I write to help the one person? How can I shoot a video with one person in mind? And when I like my YouTube videos now are averaging like 400, 500 views. My first YouTube video that I posted a few months ago got 18 views. And I remember picturing 18 people in like a coffee shop. And I was going like, that's actually a lot of people if I was to be talking and they would be listening. And it's funny how like numbers, again, take the humanity away, because we often overinflate the importance of big numbers and we underestimate the power of the small audience that are intently leaning in.
Yeah.
If you have an audience of 100 people who know, like, and trust you, you can make really good money, right? Kevin Kelly wrote...
Kevin Kelly, 1,000 True Fans.
Yeah, it's such a powerful
Is it
concept.
100 True Fans or 1,000?
1,000. But his whole thing was like, if you are passionate about a band, or if you're selling T-shirts, or like, if you've got 1,000 true fans. And so it's just fascinating to me that like this is a conversation that I think many people haven't had with themselves, which is ultimately, why am I doing this? Because I was sold this dream of, I run an ad, I have a webinar, I have this coaching business, and I'm living this laptop lifestyle, and they've lost the why. And if you lose the service element of like, you create content for an audience to help people, right? A byproduct of that help is trust, and a byproduct of trust is purchase. But if you don't actually keep the service piece a part of it, all you have is this funnel and metrics, and you actually struggle to gain traction.
Yeah.
You're running funnels to generate numbers, to look at KPIs, to optimize click-through rates, and then you wonder why you're struggling to create a sense of connection.
Yeah.
And it's like that game of Guess Who, where you're like, does your person have glasses? And you're knocking them down. It's like, niches work the same way. It's like, well, I'm looking for chiropractors on the internet. It's like, well, let's just get personal. Like what types of chiropractors? Who are they? Do you know anyone who's a chiropractor? What do they want? Yeah, what do they want? What do they need? What's the thing that keeps them up at night? All of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was authenticity.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the thing I've observed in both of us is the more comfortable we've been in our own skin, the better businesses we've created, because we actually are not creating from a place of insecurity and scarcity. I want to be someone on the internet. I want to look a certain way. And it's been a sense of like, I know for me, the physical sensation I think of is just like, just a sense of comfort in my skin. What has that journey been like for you over the last couple of years? And was that
very
gradual?
difficult.
Was there a moment like where you're like throwing in the towel on the mimicry and you're going, I'm going all in on James? Like, what has that been like?
No, I mean, the only lightning strike moment was when I realized I needed to go online when I was standing in the rain waiting for another ferry. Like, that's the only was like, screw it, I've got to do something. But everything else has been very progressive. I think 2 major events were moving to Bali, because this place, what does it do to you? I think it puts you out in an environment that you're not used to, and is very much, I mean, it's not eat what you kill, but it's very much you realize you're outside of the normal systems that you normally depend on. And then separating from my wife last year, which was like, oh, I have to find myself after being with someone for 25 years, which is like, who am I? Because you think you know yourself, but when you're in an intimate relationship, you both have shared beliefs, but you also have beliefs that you need to believe for each other. You compromise and there's trade-offs. So that those two things have been the biggest catalysts along that journey of finding who I really am. Because again, in the last 9 months, it's been around doing the things I had to do. And you talk about authenticity as well. It's like the last 9 months have been the most brutal emotionally, but also financially, that I've had to endure for almost a decade, for obvious reasons. But I've never felt more certain of who I am, and enabling me to operate in that, because I have to. Like, people depend on me. So I think when it gets real, you have to be authentic to yourself.
Well, no, you don't.
Otherwise,
you don't. This is a choice that you've made, right? Like when it gets real, you don't have to be authentic to yourself. There's so many different paths you could have taken this year, you know? So why did you choose this one? Like, what was it about this year that you were like, sorry to interrupt. Like,
no, go.
So business is moving in a great direction for you now.
Yeah.
But you could have just as easily gone like, I'm just going to focus on being a dad, and not that you're not doing that.
Yeah.
But you're also like taking leaps and strides in your health and things like that. It's definitely something that you are using to make yourself better.
Yeah.
But not everyone makes that choice.
No.
Like, and that's a brutally hard choice, because it's much easier to like drink it away or numb or whatever.
Yeah.
What has caused you to kind of approach it the way that you have this year?
I don't feel I have any choice. And that's what keeps me going. And even hearing people say what a good job I'm doing and all those things, and I get lots of praise from lots of people, makes me uncomfortable. So I'm still working on the being grateful for who I am and what I do, and that kind of receiving bit, because I feel uncomfortable now, just from you going, you could have done this another way, and it could be much worse, and it could be objectively. So your faint praise is always welcome, but discomforting. I reconfirm stuff that I guess I knew. I love being a dad, but I didn't know that I knew that.
Right.
Because my ex-wife and I had different ideas of children and what impact they'd had on our lives and those kind of things. And I'm like, no, I actually love being a dad. And I actually love having a loving relationship. So it was those moments of clarity. I also think it's easier, I'm 43. I think it's easier as you get older, because you've done more stuff and you get more of a sense of, you've done and tried more stuff, so you get more of a sense of the decisions you make. Because if you listen to yourself, you've got enough instinct to know, where's your North Star and where to go. So it's been brutally difficult in the practice of doing the things I've done in the last year, but it hasn't been difficult getting myself to do them, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think about like how different this would look and feel if you were an accountant going through a brutally hard season.
Yeah.
Because you rock up to work, you've got your spreadsheets, you've got your co-workers, you can head down and you can just almost hide. We have a very public life.
Yeah, but I did do that, and I can afford to do that.
Right.
I can afford to not work.
Yeah.
For a period of time, right?
Yeah.
So why do I go back to working, and why do I make the decisions I do? Because I can't not do it. I can't not make stuff.
So how did you navigate that, though, is what I'm trying to get to. Like, because there is a lot of professions that don't have us out publicly having this conversation.
Yeah.
That doesn't have us posting content and coaching clients and being asked the hard questions. So how did you navigate that, almost feeling like the plane is airborne and you're changing both engines at the same time? And so James is rocking up to a coaching call, and as opposed to previous seasons of life, probably doesn't feel like he's got it all together, doesn't feel like he knows which way is up. How did you navigate that and actually work through that while you're still working on all those things going on in your life?
I pretended. I acted when I needed to, that I had my shit together, to smooth the bits when I did actually have my shit together. Because I've got my shit together. But in certain moments, you definitely don't feel like it. I had moments there where I remember doing a call with a mutual friend of ours for an hour and a half in January that I had to do. And he could tell that I was not in a good spot. But most other people couldn't. But which is like the skill of, playing a character on the internet. So I think I navigated it through a mixture of grit and determination, some acting, and then giving myself a lot of grace. And also the sheer fact that I didn't have to do a lot. I had to unwind and unravel a lot of stuff in a business that was starting to show signs of being, a business that I thought I wanted. It was very leveraged and scaled, and it wasn't necessarily dependent on a personal brand and some of the things that I'm back to doing now. But I think, everything was a choice. And there were definitely times where I felt like I could curl up and sit in a hole. Right. Still are. But there's a bigger picture at play. I think the kids and a relationship I'm in now that is like got a defined future in terms of something that we're doing and going towards have been the most simple factor of that. And then, friends like you and our friend Chris, in terms of keeping me sane, in terms of like, and you've reminded me many times that everything's a choice. You get to choose every day. And those words sit with me a lot. I remember when you said them to me, you get to choose every day. And I'm lucky that I've built a lot of ways to make choices. I guess if, like you said, if I had a job and I was an accountant and I had to go to 9 to 5 and those things, I don't know how those people get through it. And a lot of mainly men don't get through it at this time of life because it feels catastrophic. The end of a long relationship with kids and intertwined and all those things. So it's not been easy, and it still isn't, but I think it gives you the reality check of the lived reality that you're actually in. Because I think these days we can live a fantasy land for a long time until the rug's pulled from under us.
And did you feel like that's where you were? Like, were you living authentically a year ago, like 2 years ago? Was there any sense of autopilot that looking back, you're like, no, I actually wasn't because I think about this in terms of business models as well. Right?
Yeah.
Like there was certain periods of time where for me and my business, I was just following Alex Hormozy. I was like it was like Braveheart. He was on the horse. We were charging 4 and we were warring against scale or whatever. And so I was just blindly just doing stuff. And it wasn't until I have these like rock bottom moments or these like, I never forget going to LA, December 2021. And the best way I could describe it is my body hit like low battery mode. It was like, wah. And it was through those periods where it kind of like woke me up a bit. And so was there any sense that there's like things were on autopilot or there was like the playing of a character or anything like that? Or was
I want to come back to what you just said because I was on the inside of that as well. So I want to give perspective on your side if I can.
Go for it.
But in hindsight, yes, there was just that curse of competency that allowed everything to keep rolling on, despite a feeling of dis-ease that kind of permeated large bits of my life. That this it was kind of a feeling for a decent part, of the last year, a year or two ago, and in that period. So there was definitely things that I ignored, but I could put them away because I do have a high pain threshold. I have the tolerance that lots of entrepreneurs have because we can tolerate things that other people can't, and we just normalize it. And I saw you go through that. I saw you knowing that you needed to stop and slow down and focus on yourself. And you were saying to me at the time that you knew you did it, but you didn't feel able to because we were both playing characters of we need to do this because there's some higher power, mummy and daddy coaching issue or mentor issues to say, what would they think of us if we pulled the plug on this 13-person business? What would they think of us if we pulled the plug on this 25-year relationship and 15-year marriage? So all the evidence is there for us. And we often know. It's the difference between knowing and knowledge, right?
Yeah.
We know. Our bodies are telling us.
Yeah.
Like the level that I've talked about with you, about my sleep issues and those kind of things for most of last year. I sleep like a baby now. Yeah. But most of last year I didn't.
Yeah.
There's this like karmic force, waking you up at 3 o'clock in the morning telling you that something's off.
Yeah.
And I just ignored all the signs.
Yeah.
And I think you recognize bits of that there was stuff there that was like, this is a signal, it's not noise.
Yeah.
Just to say that something needs to change. It's identifying the change which is the biggest challenge. And we can't do that ourselves.
Well, sometimes fear
looks very difficult anyway.
Sometimes fear looks like wisdom, right? So when you have a team, and it might not even be like, oh, what will people think? It's like, these people have jobs, and if I don't have this business, they don't have jobs.
I'm morally obligated to do this.
Right, yeah. And so for me, there was also that layer of like, I was so concerned about everyone else's health and safety. It's that metaphor of whose mask do you put on first? For me, I felt so indebted to these people on my team that I felt indebted to the clients that entrusted their hard-earned money into this business model that I'd created, that I was like, if I step out of this model, I might be serving myself, but I'm doing a disservice to everyone else.
Yeah.
And even as it turns out, that's not what happened. People found better jobs. Clients loved the transition, right? But the reality is of like, you live with that weight, and it's I don't want to oversimplify it, but so much of human nature and so much of the decisions we find ourselves making really comes down to, are we being influenced by external forces, or are we being our intentions moving us internally to actually do things and make things happen? And so like the authenticity journey for me has been really interesting because I stripped it back to nothing. And I was kind of playing around with those ideas of like, okay, so you have all the money in the world. What do you want to wake up and actually do? And as I was giving myself permission without putting the expectations of like, but I run a team of all these people, but I'm working with Alex, and what will he think? It became so freeing because I was like, man, I actually think I'm really clear on who I am and who I want to be. And I'm not running a business that reflects that. But it took me deciding that my health was most important, that my passion was most important, that I couldn't just keep upping my pain threshold and keep enduring more for everyone else's sake. I had to like really look after myself, not just from a physical, mental, emotional health perspective, but for the longevity of my life. I'm going to die at some point. Like I have no idea when my life is going to end. I hope when it does, I can look back on the seasons that I've been living it going like, I've been living true to who I am.
Yeah.
Like I've been playing this like, mimicry of trying to be this coach or this coach, but I was living the best way I damn could to be Dan Bolton, to be the truest version of who I am. And that came because I hit the pain threshold of like, I can't be this other person that I feel other people need me to be. It sounds like this year's kind of been formative for you in that way as well.
Yeah. Again, you just can't, again, the consequence piece of like, if I am and continue to be that, or if I continue to pretend, then the cost is coming into view, which is probably what you felt as well. If I keep doing this, bad things are going to happen. And I think authenticity, again, it's one of those words that has kind of been bastardized a bit, because authenticity means to lots of people just like share stuff on the internet, to manipulate people.
Yeah.
Whereas true authenticity is actually living your own life, but also understanding that evolves.
Yeah.
Like the Dan Bolton of today is not even the Dan Bolton of even tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. But there's still the same entity.
Yeah.
And going forward, that this person is authentic. If you're evolving authentically based on a small number of things that are important to you, then it's still you.
Yeah. But this is what I find interesting about evolution, is that I remember having a conversation with Liv a few years ago, and I was like, I just want to become a new Dan Bolton. I want to become like Dan Bolton 2.0.
Yeah.
And then I sat there and I thought about it, and I was like, am I becoming new Dan Bolton, or am I becoming true Dan Bolton? Now, funny play on words, but like for me, what's really interesting is like, actually, if I think about who I was as an 18-year-old, I'm more reflective of the 18-year-old now in this season than I have been for the last 5 years, because I deviated so far from the values and the vision that I had for my life. Now, this is, of course, not true at every age. I can't look back at Dan Bolton at 7. Literally, Dan Bolton at 7 wanted to be a backup dancer in the Spice Girls. 100% true. Got my mum to call the travel agents to figure out how much it would cost to fly to the UK. Like,
you took action.
You're an action taker.
I'm an action taker.
The action precedes clarity. Believe in my ability to figure it out. But when we look at over our lives...
I'm going to make that dream come true for you one day. I promise.
Please. Bring back the reunion. When we look over our lives, there is actually so much breadcrumbs as to who the true version of us is.
Yeah, definitely.
So evolution, we think about it in terms of the self-creation, but it's almost like the self-discovery of the person that was always there. I think Michelangelo carved David. Is that who did it? Or was it Leonardo da Vinci? One of the greats, right? He carved David out of the rock, and he said David was always there. I just had to chip away everything that was not him. And I think like the process of evolution is almost like that. That it's not as if you and I are blank slates right now and we go, who do we want to be? I mean, there's a level of freedom to that, but it's almost like, who have we always been that we've been ignoring this whole time? Like the idea for me, building my business around creation now. Dude, I grew up playing music. All I wanted to do was play music as an adult. That was the only thing I dreamed of doing, was music, drama. Then I spent almost a decade of my life where the main part of what I did was speaking and creating messages.
Yeah.
And then I started an ads agency, and I was just in ad accounts all day. And then I built a team, and I was just in meetings all day. There was no point where I was like, this is the version of Dan that I feel like I'm supposed to be. I just lost sight of that. And it's so tough that it takes really low moments for us to get there. But whatever it takes for us to get there, it's almost less about imagining and it's more about remembering.
I fully agree.
It's less about imagining the person we could be. It's more about remembering the person we've always been and coming back to that.
The interesting, like a story I told recently was, the pervasive childhood memory for me was Lego. So I would get Lego and I'd assemble it and I'd immediately disassemble it and then make it into lots of different things that were my own creations. And it's interesting, I'd done the same thing in business.
Right.
I'd immediately learn something and then disassemble it and make it slightly mine to get a result from it. And I still do that to this day. That innate, okay, there's a pattern here, there's a system to follow, but in the process of building that system, I think I've seen a better way to do it. I'm going to do it on my own. And again, I ignored that so many times, or I overplayed that as a one-trick pony of being, I'm just going to be a derivative of that. And it is largely remembering that, find something, stand on the shoulders of giants, but then, from a creative sense, stand on the shoulders of giants, and then, choose, add your own unique piece to it, and then choose the path, because then you'll be as far away from a synthetic, poor derivative of the core thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think we either talked about it yesterday or recently, where you were talking about your business model right now. And the business model, in one sentence, is do stuff I want to do. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So
make cool shit.
So why do we overcomplicate it? Like why is it that people go through all of the seasons of like being someone they're not and all that kind of stuff? Is it that we just don't know? Is it that we feel like we haven't given ourselves permission for it? We don't have the skills? Because I feel like I'm in the same season. I only want to do stuff I'm excited to do. And it's super profitable, super fun. And I'm like, why did I do this?
Not only that, the crazy thing is, people admire and respect it much more than any other action, because 100%. They're like, it is so obvious that someone is living their own lives.
Yeah.
And that is freedom.
Yeah.
Right? So we talk about freedom as the highest pursuit of humans and these things, which I believe. And when they see someone doing what they really genuinely want and loving it, people are like, I want to follow this model.
Right.
And you can be so uncompromising on that.
Yeah.
Like, I am so uncompromising now. I am so kind of strong boundaries around things that I do.
Yeah.
But in the container, there's a coaching word, in the container of what I make, it's going to be the best thing it possibly is for what it says on the tin. Mm-hmm. And people admire and respect that.
Yeah.
Because they're like, that's freedom. He's doing what he wants.
I think Joseph Campbell says, we're not so much searching for meaning in life as we are for the experience of being fully alive.
Yeah.
And then people wonder why, as a stressed out coach, they're struggling to get clients. But it's like, if I'm signing up to a coach who looks like they're miserable and stressed and they hate the business that they're in, in what world am I going to be feeling more fully alive working with them than another coach who feels like you're actually looking at their business and you're going, oh, they're having this thing called fun. That's crazy. And that's been interesting for me as I've been creating content more in this year, as I've been burned everything to the ground, simplified things. People will say things like, I really like your videos, don't really know why I feel such a connection with you. I really like your energy. Or something to that effect. And for me, there's marketing, psychology, and all sorts of stuff. And no doubt I have skills that are undergirding that I've built over the last few years. The biggest thing is like, I'm only creating videos I want to create. Yeah. I refuse to create anything I'm not excited about. So we have done no YouTube research, like with launching the YouTube channel around like best trends. I'm like, I want to talk about things I want to talk about, and I want to talk about them in a way that I'm excited to talk about them. I don't want to just create content for the sake of it. I don't want to create a funnel for the sake of it. I don't want to create anything for the sake of it. But most people, that's where they live from. They live from that energy of need, and I have to, rather than the energy of I get to.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where I think there's the big shift that a lot of people could make.
I think it could, and I think there's a whole industry that's going to prevent them.
Right.
Which is the one we're in.
Right.
Because I think a huge amount of people buy coaching, or what is called coaching now in terms of the group coaching environment, because of trauma bonding.
Right.
They're looking for an authority figure in their life because they were unfulfilled from the authority figures that were, presented to them in early life. And you've alluded to this. And there's a huge fear of annoying mummy or daddy because you don't follow the system.
Right.
And that has then injected learned helplessness into the actions of people who are scared to move on their own and scared to do what they really want in case they're outcast from the group. So we've got mummy and daddy issues, trauma bonding, and tribe dynamics all like convalescing around keeping people stuck.
Yeah.
But just enough people can mimic the business model of the person they're learning from, or the skills or whatever it is to be successful for that scheme to continue.
Yeah.
But the failure rates of the promised result in this industry are disgusting. They're single figure percentages because the promises got so big and so ridiculous and the guarantees got so out of this world. Thanks, Mr. Hormozy. I see the purple book over there.
Yeah.
You know, or you don't pay. That it's acceptable to have like single figure kind of success things.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about what both you and I have done is like not measured success just on money.
Right.
We're talking to people and saying, what lights you up? Do you want a fun business? Do you want to do it with ease?
Yeah.
Because you can have profit as well.
Yeah.
But it's a byproduct of these things. And we talk about profit, we talk about money, we talk about all these things because they're important to get freedom, and they're downstream from these things, and resources enable us to do things.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting journey that both you and I are on right now is that we're not doing it. We're not making money that's compromising the fun and the ease and the values and those things.
Yeah.
And that's what people resonate with. They're like, because money is actually, people hate that. Money is actually easy.
Yeah.
Right? The other stuff is difficult.
Oh yeah.
But it's got to be the right money. It's got to be the right scoreboard. And that's what people are looking for. And that's a healthy byproduct of a sophistication of a marketplace as well. Because someone said to me in a message this morning, I'm not looking for another guru right now. And I was like, tongue in cheek back saying, thank you for tangentially calling me a guru. What do you, and then just ask some questions like, what do they want and those things.
Yeah.
And none of the questions are like, how much money do you want to make?
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing right now? What are you enjoying? What are you hating? What do you want us to look like?
Yeah.
And what's meaningful to you in terms of profitability and those things from where you are.
Yeah.
In many cases, the hard thing that people won't let go of is that to change business models and change some of the things that they need to change because they're keeping them trapped.
Yeah.
There is a period where you go backwards before you go forwards. I've had to go backwards before I went forwards, in recent history.
Yeah.
But I needed to do it for lots of reasons. But I also had accepted that was going to be the case, that I could take the L's for a few months to get back on, to actually do and be inside something that I loved.
I think like this kind of brings me to the word of the theme that I had for this year, which is this whole idea of conscious. Yeah. And I hate that in the way that it gets hijacked by the spiritual entrepreneurs of like, we work with conscious coaches. And I understand
we're repurposing all these words.
100%. Yeah, we're claiming them back. But this idea of like, I want to build a life based off intention. I want to be awake at the wheel, not asleep at the wheel, not on autopilot. And I think like my hope is for anyone like listening to this conversation that they realize that without knowing all the details, it starts with a decision. Am I going to try and, like I was listening to someone the other day that was saying the opposite of being yourself is fitting in. Because fitting in requires you to be someone you think the tribe needs you to be to fit in well.
Yeah, it's literally taking the shape of something to make it fit.
Exactly, right? And so most of us have spent our lives being professional fitting innerers, right? Like we manage the perception of other people. We want to go to the event. We don't want to be the odd one out. We don't want to be at the metaphorical lunch table by ourselves. We want to be in a tribe. And what that often means is we have to sacrifice who we are to be what we think the tribe needs us and wants us to be. And for me, I know it sounds like it's for you, it comes down to this decision you make, which is that am I living for others or am I going to live for myself? And that doesn't mean am I living a life of selfishness or selflessness. The most selfless thing you could do is live a life that's fully expressing yourself in service of others.
Yeah. But it's not even good strategy. Because being a freaky weirdo gets you the most attention. Like fitting in is like the least profitable thing that anyone can do. Yeah. Yet everybody's doing it. But because it's not for the reasons of strategy, it's for the reasons of, self-worth. It's for the reasons of self-esteem.
Yeah.
So it doesn't even make any sense in the game that people are trying to play of fitting in. Because standing out is the most profitable thing you can ever do in today's society.
And isn't it so ironic? It's like in pursuit, like that's what I found with the season I'm in, is the less I focus on money and the more I focus on doing stuff I want to do, the more money I make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more fun I have, the more it makes.
No.
Like to the point where we talked about this yesterday, I was like, it should feel like it's cheating.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? If like success, like it should feel like it's cheating.
Yeah.
And sometimes I look around and go, this must be cheating.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of days this week where I was like, this has got to be cheating.
Yeah. 100%.
That I did that much and I got this much back.
Yeah.
Across multiple domains, you know, financial and, you know, meaning and all those things.
Yeah.
I'm like, this feels like cheating.
Well, this just comes back to this idea of self-awareness. Who am I? What am I passionate about? What are my skill sets? What kind of life do I want to lead? And then what business will help me achieve those things? And I think if people ask those questions like we have, you come up with some really hard answers sometimes, which is that like, I have a business that exists to pay the bills or fuel the ego or deal with the insecurities, rather than one that's expression of my, for lack of a better term, my soul's work, my calling, like why I feel like I'm on earth. And I just think for me, this year has been a line in the sand year of I am no longer doing life on autopilot. I'm not trying to be someone else that I feel like I need to be. I want to be the most authentic expression of myself. Still figuring it out. Haven't figured it out. Finding my voice. Still doing all that stuff. Yeah. But it came from the conscious decision of like, enough is enough. And I think like that's where a lot of people I think need to get to that point. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes a lot of pain to get there. But if someone can manufacture the point of clarity of just like, I'm not going to wait until I, you know, go through a really hard season of separation or hit low battery mode and burn out and all that. But they just pull themselves aside and just like get really clear on what they want. I think it would be a huge gift to so many people. Yeah.
I think pain is essential, but I think the suffering is optional. And that's why I think these ideas of mentorship, of community are so critical, and leadership are so critical to now, because they don't remove, but they mitigate and ease the suffering, right? You know, what's a terrible analogy? I'll go for a terrible analogy. If you go and lift weights and we've both done CrossFit, you do Fran, right?
Oh, dang, yeah.
So doing Fran on your own and doing it in a room full of people are different things, right? They both hurt, but one, you've got to mentally suffer and motivate yourself. The other one, there's people around you, music, status, you know, all those things. And this is where I think the concepts of community and mentorship are just there, not to take the pain away, because the difficult questions must be asked and the work must be done, but they can definitely mitigate some of the suffering. And that's what I'm in it for. Like, I'm not trying to take pain away. It's the same as parenting. I'd love to take all the pain away from my kids, but I also know that there are some dire consequences for them. And I think most parents feel like that to some degree. We'd love to not make them fall over and stumble and have horrible things happen to them, but the lessons they get from them are priceless. Yeah. And I see the same as like with people and clients and ideas and these things. Is like, if you're there and you can mitigate the suffering and make the pain worthy because there's a good why behind it, because they're inflicting the right pain on themselves, then that's what I'm here for anyway.
Yeah. And that is the distinction, is it's not about, is entrepreneurship going to be hard? Even in the midst of, it's not a question you need to ask anymore. Right?
Yeah. It's going to be.
But even in the fun stuff, it's like I mean, entrepreneurship is hard because you never live up to your potential. So even if things are easy on the model side, you're never satisfied in the sense that there's always more in the tank. There's always more that can be accomplished. And so like hard is difficult because you've got to get skills and traits and all those types of things. But you want the smart type of pain, not the foolish type of pain, you know? Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they are suffering unnecessarily. Like, I'll never forget, like, messaging Hormozy a few years ago. I said, what do you think of 75 hard? And I'll never forget what he said back. He said, most entrepreneurs mistake difficulty for progress. Yeah. Oh, if this is hard, the harder something is, the better it must be for me, right? Yeah. But there is a good training session in the gym, and there is a stupid training session in the gym, right? There is one where you get inadequate recovery, where you overstress the muscles, where you train so much to failure that you're not in a point of growth, you're now injured, right? And that's where I think most people live in that red line state. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't. But I do think that you need to go there a couple of times to understand it doesn't need to be that way.
You got to touch a few stoves to know that fire burns.
I'm convinced you have to. I think we can model. I think we can learn. I think we can take shortcuts. And I think the informational and the connection advantage we have in the world we live in is ridiculous. Yeah. Like, what a time to be alive. But I don't think you can make progress without, as you say, touching a few stoves.
Yeah.
I don't think you make your own true progress to understand your preferences.
Yeah.
Because we both know people that we love that have businesses and lives that we would hate, but they love them.
Yeah.
So they needed to go through the journey to build that life. And if we'd gone through it, we would have just had a different path.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you need to do stuff to find out that you don't want to do stuff. Or which stuff you want to do more specifically.
Yeah. You gotta do seasons of not being yourself to find out who you are.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, as we sit here now, today, I'm pushing a lot of stuff very hard. And I've shared with you, in the last few days, I'm like, if I continue to push all the domains I'm pushing in now, I'm pushing a lot of things physically, I'm pushing a lot of things mentally, financially and with ambition, that if I continue to push on all these domains as hard as I'm pushing on all these, I'll burn out. So soon I'm going to need to make a decision on which the next season, but I'm pushing everything hard to get to a point where I can coast on a couple of things while I push the next thing in the leg up. And that, to me, I wouldn't have had that wisdom even relatively recently. It was just like push at all costs and red line out because I've got a high capacity. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap because they've got a high capacity. They're always trying to find it. So they go and burn out and try and do everything, push everything, run after everything. Yeah, I'm doing 75 hard and I'm going to add $1 million to my revenue in the next month. And, I've got 5 girlfriends and whatever their focus is. But there are seasons of like, you can push everything, but it's about momentum. It's about achieving momentum in those and then allowing those things to have their own momentum so then that they then serve you, whether it's your body, your mind, your relationship, your business or whatever it is.
Agreed. Bro, we've been at this for a while. This has been a joy.
Have we?
I don't know, an hour and something, hour and a half, something like that.
Oh my goodness.
It's been a great time. First of many. I know you've launched something recently and you're kind of like going back to something you used to love doing a lot. Daily emails, swipemymarketing.com.
Yeah.
Is that where people
Do you like
go?
the domain?
Yeah.
I own so many, I just had to choose one.
When you brought it up, I was like, this is so random. But I didn't know you owned it and all of that.
Well, just a little bit of thinking behind that. It was like, I got sick of, I didn't like the whole, 3 secrets thing. I'm like a full send person. So I'm like, if you want it, use it, take it. I'm going to give everything away and, give away all the insights and show you behind the scenes. And then make a lot of the things, like the digital products I'm making, super accessible. Like I just did a $100 thing. And if you want help, I'm here.
Yeah.
So to me, it was like congruent with where I'm at, with like 15 odd years of doing stuff online and making offers and seeing millions of them, literally. That it was like, I know a lot of stuff. I'm going to share a lot of stuff. If you swipe it, great. If you want some help, cool.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
So it felt like the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, and the thing I want to land on, because it's reflective of authenticity, of finding the right model, is you're starting up a daily email or a mostly daily email.
Yeah.
So talk about why that was important for you to come back to that and how can people get on that?
Yeah. So swipemymarketing.com. Sign up. Writing's been a practice for 2 decades. I write lots of words, helps me think. Daily emails supernatural, very natural for me to do. So I can write a couple of things a day and put words out really easily. And it's always the things I can do consistently are the most important things. And what's my highest leverage activity was always the choice I make. So I send an email every day. I make an offer every day. If people want my help, people want to buy something, great. If they want to unsubscribe, great. All the offers are on the table. So for me, it was like, what can I do consistently? What's my highest leverage activity? I don't do a ton of video or a ton of other media. Writing in the Word is my thing. And so what's my highest leverage activity and how do I put that out? And it's back to email, back to sending regularly. And it's great. You get, after being on social for so long, you get a depth and connection and a privacy and an intimacy that you don't necessarily get in DMs, which are short. You have people writing War and Peace coming back to you like, this is this and this, I've been through this, I want to do this, does this even exist?
Yeah.
And you can have proper conversations and at a different pace.
Yeah.
You know, the online world is like, literally something is forgotten the moment it's out there. Whereas with email and these things, it's an ongoing conversation in a depth.
Yeah.
And at a time in my life when the depth matters much more than the width.
Yeah.
So it's the right thing at the right time.
I love it. It's also that self-awareness piece, right? We've been hanging out all year more than normal because we're living, not together, but basically together. And you were talking about writing this kind of ebook. I think you're putting out. I don't know if you're still putting it out, but and then I was listening to this guy called Dan and he's like writing online. And so I went through this period of like, I'm just going to write.
Yeah.
Miserable. I was like staring at a blank page being like, I hate this. I love putting together quick posts, but I'm video audio. That's my thing.
Yeah.
And so I love that you've gone back to that because I've seen your enjoyment factor of business go up dramatically where you're like, wait a minute, there's this thing I used to do that I enjoy
really
doing.
Good, yeah.
I stopped doing it. I enjoy
really
it less.
Effective.
And now, yeah. And so I think that's just such a simple piece of like, what do you enjoy doing? Look at the breadcrumbs of the past and do more of the stuff you enjoy doing that's a reflection of who you are and less of the stuff that's not.
Yeah, but can I share, because this is really insightful for people, that I'm still jealous of you having a YouTube channel and a Dylan and all these cameras and this and those things. And I could subtly convince myself that I should be doing all this, despite that not being my highest leverage and biggest opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, the thing I should be doing.
I get it. And I feel the exact same way in reverse.
That never goes away.
I feel the exact same way in reverse.
So self-awareness is like, because that never goes away, I'm like, Dan's got a YouTube channel that's really cool. Man, his thumbnails are sexy. And Dylan's like, he's got his shit to, I want this. And then I'm like, I'm just going to write my email.
I think the same way. I literally think about how much better my thinking would be if I wrote every day. And don't get me wrong, I write often on Facebook, but they're not like posts or emails or well thought out. It's like literally stream of consciousness, no editing, posted. And it's that funny thing of like, we always look at the business model of someone else that we don't have, that they have, that we convince ourselves must be better than it is for them. And what I love is you look at Joe Rogan, who's never shot a reel in his life, who's never written a blog, who doesn't write Facebook posts. And he just does podcasts and he does what he does and he's Joe Rogan. And it crushes. And so it's not about doing the right thing. It's about doing the thing that's the most right for you.
Yeah.
And that will work the best and create the deepest connection and the best business. Good place to land the plane. I appreciate you a ton. I appreciate your friendship. I am looking forward to many more of these conversations. And thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.